Picking a quarter off the ground once saved my life. What is your most lucky experience? I think this happened in 9th grade. I was just laying on my bed using my laptop. I had been like that for hours, and I suddenly decide I'm hungry and go grab a snack from the kitchen. When I'm in the kitchen I hear a loud crash, and I run back into my room. My ceiling fan had fallen right where my head had been a minute ago. My cat had also been on the bed, but thankfully she was far enough away that it didn't hit her, although it certainly freaked her out. So I'm alive, but I now have a healthy fear of ceiling fans. When I lived in my old house, a really old house, I had a really old desktop computer that sat at a desk in my room. My bed also sat right under the ceiling fan. One night I was at my computer really late at night past my bedtime and the ceiling fan fell on my bed. 12-year-old me had a fun time explaining how the fan fell and how I wasn't in bed at the time. I still got in trouble. I once had an allergic reaction that saved my life. My wisdom tooth removal got screwed up and a giant cyst formed in my neck. Not being able to tell this from the swelling, I let it go until it got really bad. I called the dentist and he put me on some antibiotics. I had an allergic reaction and went to the hospital when my throat closed up. They do an imaging and find that the cyst is just about to dump all its delicious goo into my carotid artery, something that would have likely killed me. Yay, allergies. I'm supposed to be getting my wisdom teeth out soon. Fantastic. Time to freak out. I was driving with my friends and one asked to go to Arby's at the last second. It was on the left in the middle of the block. I turn left and just after we clear the intersection, I hear a car gunning the engine. The car that was behind me was barreling towards the cars parked at the stoplight and plowed into the car that was in front of me. The driver had a seizure or something. Fat friend saved my butt. That's good mood food. I was once choking on a steak outside when a random neighborhood dog that was lost noticed I was choking and started barking like crazy. My parents noticed just in time to help me. That's a double win right there. You didn't choke and you found the neighbor's lost dog. Good on you. When I was younger, I loved climbing in this huge pine tree that grew next to my garage. With pine trees though, the branches dry and get really brittle, so I fell out of it a number of times, accidentally putting my weight on a branch that just couldn't hold me. After the 4th time I fell out of the tree and broke a finger. I was forbidden to climb that tree ever again. Being a 10-year-old boy, I couldn't obey this tyrannical rule. I waited for my parents to go to work, then I climbed it one last time. Of course, a branch snaps. On the way down, I hit a thick branch and flip end over end before slamming into the ground. Groaning in the bushes, I roll over to my side to see a piece of steel rebar sticking up next to me, right under my armpit, about 3 inches from piercing my torso. I was almost impaled on a piece of an old fence. This terrified me to no end for years. I'd have nightmares of falling towards a rusty rebar spear in slow motion. I think that if I hadn't hit that other branch on the way down, or even went off that branch in the other direction, I would have speared myself and lay there dying for hours. At least it didn't ultimately end up with your paralysis and your treasonous father's beheading. Alright, so, my mother used to swear that this entire story is because of divine intervention. It's a cool story either way. I lived in a trailer park for most of my childhood, in my small town, which was almost too new to have many stick-built houses. The trailer park was actually rather nice. Well-kept lawns, gardens, etc. We lived there until I was about 14, at which point my parents were considering moving to a town 40 miles away. My mother was for it, my father against. We drove by this one white house in my town. Beautiful lawn, trees, etc. The previous owners really took care of it. My mother offhandedly said now, if that house ever came up for sale, we could stay in this town. 2 weeks later, it went up for sale. 2 weeks after that, we won the bid for it. A week after that, we sold our old house and moved into the new one. A week later, the trailer park we had been living in was destroyed by a F4 tornado. We watched the tornado happen from our back porch, before we watched the trampoline come flying out of the yard like a frisbee and decided to take cover. Spent most of that night at the local clinic. My mom and dad were EMT certified, so they were needed to help the survivors. I was in charge of keeping the little kids calm that had been in their house when it flipped over 12 times, and they still couldn't find their parents. It was all over the news the first time my little town of 1,500 had ever been on national television. It took weeks of effort from everyone in the town to clean up and get FEMA houses in there. I spent a lot of time helping hand out food at the local gym. The house we moved out of was never found. The frame was completely missing. The gentleman who bought our house was one of the 2 casualties. That week, a big news syndicate ran a feature story about the devastation, with the basis for the story being that the journalist had seen a wooden plank with the words "Give us this day" on it in the middle of the destruction. The wood above our dining room said "Give us this day our daily bread." TLDR. Moved out of a house a week before it was destroyed by a tornado. Give us this day. Freaking chills all up my spine. There was a time when I was mowing the lawn next to my driveway. I was turning the mower around to do another strip of grass when I itched the side of my head, covering my right eye with the back of my right hand. Right as I did this, a rock shot from side of the mower and hit the back of my hand right where my eye was. Still have the scar. I just scratched my head. Didn't save crap. 1994 or so, age 17. I was attempting to cross an intersection in my slow 82 Chevy Chevette. I did not see the car until a few seconds before it T-boned the driver's side of my car, but I was able to hit the gas just enough so that when the other car hit mine, it smashed the backseat area of the car. Had it connected with the front seat area, I could have easily been paralyzed or killed, but instead I had what the doctors called a jammed thigh bone. I didn't even break anything, but I still was on crutches for a few weeks. When I was about 7 years old, I fell through the ice on the lake behind my house. I was wearing ice skates. Not easy to tread water with heavy blades on your feet. Well, the closest house to where I fell through happened to be the home of a fireman who happened to be in his driveway packing his truck for a fishing trip and happened to hear me yelling. He got there just in time to see me struggling to keep my head above water. The ice just kept breaking away every time I tried to hoist myself up and throw me a hose to pull me in. Like a goddamn fireman. I know that feeling. I fell through the ice once. I didn't have skates on, but my problem was that I got swept under more ice that didn't break at first. When I was still a toddler, I had escaped my sister's ever watchful gaze and went outside where my dad was fixing the roof. He didn't notice me come out. According to our neighbor who witnessed the whole thing, I was standing right next to his ladder when he dropped his huge mallet directly where I was standing. Luckily, seconds before this happened, my cat came out of the backyard and I had waddled over to pet her. TLDR. Petting kitties saves lives. Yep, accidentally dropped it directly where you were standing. Not me, but my super awesome granddad. He always used to say that being a red-blooded American teenager saved his life in World War II. He was a ball turret gunner stationed in Italy. Ball turret gunners had some of the lowest life expectancies in the Army Air Corps, seeing as they were constantly exposed to enemy gunfire. Since the job was so dangerous, gunners got certain perks. One of those perks was a nice bicycle. Granddad was riding around Italy when he saw this amazingly gorgeous Italian woman. Hottest woman he'd ever seen. He did what any 18-year-old boy would do. He stared at her. Then he fell. He broke his collarbone and was hospitalized. He was scheduled for a flight later that day but obviously couldn't go up. That flight was shot down and all the crew were killed. And so, I thank my lucky stars every day that granddad had a thing for hot Italian chicks. Otherwise, I wouldn't exist. TLDR. Boner saved my granddad's life. When I was in high school, I was supposed to go out to my family's lake house for the weekend and my mom ended up getting food poisoning and we couldn't go. My boyfriend was having a party that night and I decided to just drive over there and ended up walking in on him cheating on me. The lucky part is I was so in love with this guy I probably would have married him right after graduation and been the wife of a drug addicted butthole that has spent more time in jail than out since then. TLDR. My mom's explosive diarrhea saved me from marrying a M-head with no teeth. Best story in TLDR form perhaps ever. I was driving to a cabin with my mom last summer when we noticed a pack of wolves in the middle of the dirt road we were on. There was forest on either side of us, so we couldn't go around until they moved. We sat there for at least half an hour as they walked up to the car and stared at us. Coolest experience I think I had last year. Once they decided to go back into the woods, we continued driving. Once on the highway we got stuck in a crap ton of traffic and started resenting the wolves. Turns out 20 minutes earlier there was a 10+ car pileup involving an oil tanker and an explosion. Chances are we could have been involved if not for the wolves. Dude, you not only got to see wild wolves up close, but you got to see magical, life-saving, wild wolves up close. I was passenger in the car, driving back home with my 2 friends a few years ago in the winter time. My buddy was too tired to drive at one point, so he pulled over in the right hand shoulder and we switched. I take a look to my left, and as I'm about to pull out, car in drive, taking foot off the brake, I realize that I didn't adjust my rearview mirror. I adjust it, and see 2 things. My friend laying across the backseat taking a nap, and a green car hauling butt in the shoulder, headed directly towards us. The car must have been going 80+ mph, since it was going faster than everyone in the right and left lane. I immediately hit the brake again, and the second I do the lady gently sideswipes us. She loses control of her car, does 2 complete spins, and rolls off the side of the thruway, down a hill, wedging herself between 2 trees. There were only some minor scrapes on the side of our car. Her car, totaled. If I hadn't looked at the rearview mirror, 2 things could have happened. We would have gotten hit dead on while stationary, and my friend would have been a serious projectile, or we would have gotten T-boned and fricked just as bad. The best part? My friend waking up after the car gets swiped, groggily saying what happened and then watching the horror on his when he sees this lady's car get owned. She was totally fine. BTW. TLDR. Lady loses control of her car, almost turns my friend into human football. I have told this story on Reddit a while ago I am sure. I used to live in Christchurch, New Zealand. One day my girlfriend and I were having lunch in the city. We get some fried rice. $2 rice is awesome. We forget to buy a drink, so after we finish our meal we line up to get a Coke. But because it was lunchtime it was really filling up, so we decide to leave the shop and get a drink elsewhere. We leave the store, walk outside when a massive earthquake hits. The shop front where we were falls in on itself. 30 seconds earlier we would have been in trouble. I have a friend that decided to fly out of Christchurch a day early and head to Australia. Her flight left an hour before the quake. Finds out later her hotel had collapsed, where she probably would have been packing at the time. I was about to cross an intersection when I swear I heard a voice next to me say stop. I did stop, in confusion as there was no one around but myself, and watched as a city bus flew past me at well over the posted speed for that road. It was on a blind intersection, and even if I had checked both ways, I probably would still have been hit if I had crossed. I may be USSS, I may be USSS, I may bus. It happened the exact thing to me. I went to get my driver's license with 2 other friends and I was told I needed another copy of my ID. When we came back after getting it, I accidentally dropped a worthless 10 Mexican cents coin, and then a friend stopped to pick it up, and we all stopped. That exact moment, we heard freaking tires screeching and a car crashed right in front of us. You don't realize how close it was until some minutes later. We couldn't do anything but laugh and keep that coin. My friend still has it. I like to leave coins at intersections to mess with people's heads. This is a story about my older brother Jack, younger brother Dan and father. They were vacationing in Scotland. At the time they were both avid hikers and wanted to traverse the mountains there. It was an extremely windy day, even for Scotland, and they were having a bit of trouble making it up their trail for the day. Dan had to hold on to my dad's jacket to keep from being blown over. Still, they managed to make slow progress. Towards the top of the mountain, there was a lookout they decided to stop at. My dad and little brother sat down to get some rest, while Jack leaned against a large boulder. It was a beautiful view, right on the edge of a cliff, and you could see for miles. As they were relaxing, there was a loud noise, and suddenly the boulder shifted and started rolling. It went over my father's leg, who yelled out in pain. The shifting rock made my older brother off balance, and he started to fall backwards off the cliff. He locked his fearful eyes with my father, who didn't have time to do anything as he fell. It was a knowing look, a look that said goodbye, I love you, it's okay. My little brother was too shocked to react quickly enough either. At that exact moment, a huge gust of wind blew behind Jack, pushing him up enough to regain his balance. He then ran to my dad and little brother, embracing them. My dad's leg ended up being broken, and they took a long time getting back down the mountain with Jack supporting him. They ended the trip that day, heading back to the US. I cry every single time I think about this story. My brother is my hero, and I don't know what I would have done without him had he actually fallen that day. Nature and luck were with him. That crap cray, probably the most divine intervention happening I've read about here. Glad it all worked out. When I was growing up, it was my the 5th of July tradition to go to the site of the city's fireworks display, publicly accessible about a block from my house, and root around to see what I could find. Usually there'd be some cannon fuse, green slow burning fuse, and some awesome looking pieces of burnt cardboard. There'd usually be small undetonated 0.5 inches diameter cylinders about an inch long made of cardboard with small fast burning fuses sticking out of the end. I was familiar with these small fireworks. I'd been finding them for years. You know those fireworks that explode into spiraling white sparks? They were unexploded spinning spark clusters. The fuse was incredibly short, so as soon as a flame was touched to them they'd spin and shoot harmless sparks out of the end. One year I discovered what seemed to be a much larger version of these spark clusters. It was about 2 inches in diameter and 6 inches long. It seemed to be made of the same material, brown cardboard with clay blocking the ends. The same fast burning fuse was sticking out of the end. I returned to my friend's house and we started firing off all of our loot, mostly the small spark bombs and a few other goodies. When it was time for the grand finale, I pulled out the gigantic spark cluster and put it on the ground. I lit the lighter, held the flame out towards the fuse and stopped myself. I realized that I wouldn't have a good view of all of the sparks if I was so close. I looked around and found a bottle rocket that we hadn't fired with a 1.5 inches green fuse and rested it on top of the large cylinder. Surely 1.5 inches of fuse will be enough for me to get a good view of the sparks. I lit it and turned. I was wrong. I made it maybe 10 feet before this thing freaking exploded. I don't mean exploded in the whoa that was awesome sense. I mean exploded in the where is my shirt and why is there a hole in the asphalt sense. My friend and I instantly ran into the house, safe from the inevitable police arrival, and ran upstairs laughing the whole time. It wasn't until we got upstairs that I realized that my shirt had been torn off. Later inspection of the detonation site revealed a 1 inch shallow crater in the asphalt about 8 inches wide. If I hadn't added that bottle rocket I would have, at best, lost an arm. Reminds me of when Mythbusters tested if you could blow somebody's socks off with an explosion. The myth failed, but a shirt, My story is quite similar actually. I was crossing a crosswalk on my way home from work at 8 AM. I dropped my iPod and stopped to pick it up, and as I stood up, there's a bus in front of my face going at least 40 miles per hour in a 20 mile per hour zone. I almost shat myself. My last day in Iraq, November 26, 2006. I was struck in the leg by a stray bullet. Had I not leaned over to fart in my sleeping friend's face, it would have hit me in the chest. Flatulence saved my life. Oh man, I've had my share of near misses, but I think this one takes the cake. I was at this nightclub with a few buddies. It was a really shady nightclub, the kind with lots of fights, drugs, and all that fun stuff. I only went because it was $3 beer night, so I'm just doing my thing, and I spot out a pretty foxy looking young lady holding a drink and dancing by herself. We chit-chat a little, and we're both a little tipsy at this point. As we're making some good conversation, I notice a guy who looks exactly like Will Ferrell walk by in the background, and mind you, I was drunk so my mind may have been playing tricks on me. I tilt my head to the side to get a closer look, and right when I do that, a fist scrapes by my ear from behind. Turns out the girl had a boyfriend and he wasn't too happy about me chatting up his special lady, but since he missed the hit, and he was pretty drunk himself, He stumbled and collapsed on me. My buddies saw this and rushed over to help by suppressing the guy. We booked it out of there and never went back. TLDR. Chatting with lady in club. Angry boyfriend tries to donkey punch me and misses because I drunk saw Will Ferrell. My family and I used to go on a hike a lot. When I was little, we trekked into a wild, no-trail mountain. It rained the day before so the ground was still muddy. We were walking on a ledge with no guardrails with wet mud. As soon my mom warned me to be careful not to slip. I slip and fall off the ledge that was about 70 degrees in angle and at least a couple 100 feet down. Then, miraculously my dad jumps and grabs me by my shirt with one hand and grabs a tree with another and pulls me up using both of his arms. I only had few scratches and was okay thanks to my Superman dad and his Asian reflex. His Asian reflexes. He quickly did the math to determine if the tree could hold both yours and his weight and the force needed to lift you to safety. I was being very stupid. Yes, I know. Drunk with friends on a warehouse roof at night. Had a race with a buddy of mine. It was a huge roof, like Walmart parking lot sized, and it's pitch black out. I win the race because he drops out and starts yelling about it. I think he's yelling because he lost. All of a sudden I go from top speed to 0 because I smashed into a steel wall somehow. I'm in too much pain to realize what has happened, so after a bit of yelling and tears my forebrain kicks back in and I realize I'm on the floor. I had snagged a foot on a low pipe and had gone instantly 90 degrees into the ground. Nothing broken but some bruised ribs and some bloody abrasions on my arms. I was more embarrassed than anything else. So I get up and sheepishly go back to my friends. One of whom is obviously the guy who lost the race. He's like, dude, look where you fell. Why didn't you stop? I was yelling like crazy and of course I'm like, yeah I know I didn't see that pipe, man. It's freaking dark out here. Who puts pipes on a roof anyways, he says. No, freaking crap, man. Look, and points at where I fell. The pipe was about 10 feet from the edge of the roof. If I hadn't tripped on it I would have done a Carl Lewis right off into oblivion 5 stories down into the parking lot, aka my grave. Felt the cold fingers of the Reaper that night, but Sirio fooled my butt out of there. Not today, mother. My dad's life was saved by Stairway to Heaven. TSDR. He was a construction worker in San Francisco and was driving to work early in the morning. Stairway comes on the radio and he was driving generally sluggishly so he could finish the song before he actually got to his workplace. At an intersection he was caught by a red light and there was nobody behind him, so he very slowly began driving once the light turned green. About 20 feet ahead, where he and his truck would have been, there was a huge explosion of rubble and flames. Apparently a gas main had burst earlier that day and the gas ignited. He heard that the explosion killed about 20 people on the news later that night. If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed now. In a pretty busy city, I was waiting at the crosswalk for the lights to change. The light changed to walk. I walked about to the middle of the road and immediately tripped on my shoelaces and fell onto the roadway in front of a car waiting for me to cross. Right as I hit the pavement, a truck ran the adjacent red light and whizzed right in front of me at 70 miles per hour, tailed by a cop with his lights and sirens blaring. Being horribly clumsy saved me from a horrible truck-related death. Every morning my husband and I would go sit in our front driveway at about 8 AM to have a smoke. One day after we woke up I asked my husband to come back to bed and sleep in with me instead of us going out yet. I wanted sexy time, so of course he obliged. When about 3 minutes later we hear a loud crashing sound come from the front yard. We quickly ran out to see what had happened and saw a trail of broken trees and wooden fence planks leading to where our SUV normally sat every morning. I honestly stood there dumbfounded for a moment and asked my husband where our car went and realized it was in our neighbor's yard. A young guy had a seizure while driving and plowed into the passenger side going about 75 miles per hour and caused the SUV to flip twice before landing in the neighbor's yard. I went to aid the poor guy and call an ambulance, and when the paramedics arrived it hit me how close I was to death if I hadn't been a lazy sex hound. I normally sit with the door wide open while seated in the passenger side while we have our morning smoke, and looking at the damage alone, I most surely would not have survived. TLDR. I was saved from certain death by being frisky and lazy. Most of the time, sex will either create or save lives. Rarely will it kill, but if it does, it is usually because the person was already a murderous loony or AIDS. When I was 9, our air conditioning system broke, so a friend of my mom, who is also a police detective, came to look at it. As he was walking to the front yard to leave, I called out to him, "Helmer, wait." He stopped and turned around to see what I wanted, and just as he did, I forgot what I was going to say. Just then tires screech and a Trans Am comes careening around the corner and slams into his unmarked cruiser, seriously doing 40 miles per hour at impact. He draws his weapon and yells, "Freeze, mother." He would have almost certainly been between the cars if I had not said something. Helmer is such a cop name. I was hiking in PA and came to a vista at the top of a mountain. I was standing there, taking in the view, when I heard some leaves rustling at my feet. I looked down and there was a large rattlesnake about an inch from where I was standing. I had stopped just short of stepping on it. At the time I didn't even think about how close I had come to stepping on it. I just thought it was freaking cool that I was seeing a wild rattlesnake. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.